Hello, thank you for joining me for another morning cup of cow shit. This is another one that is way overdue, but the amount of crazy stuff that keeps coming out of Point Reyes National Seashore is kind of like the Trump administration. It's about the time I wrap my head around something, even more stuff is coming. So anyway, this goes back a couple of months ago. Two things happened around the same time. Melanie Gunn stated to me that they would kill the elk no matter what, and Craig Kenkel was named the new superintendent of Point Reyes National Seashore. We'll get back to that Melanie Gunn quote in a second, but a little bit on Kenkel. Kenkel comes from a park in Iowa that promotes farming and actively kills native animals. Point Reyes promotes ranching and wants to kill native animals. What a fit. And in the case of Point Reyes, when I say they want to kill, I should say officially kill as part of a management plan, because there's a fat chance in hell that native wildlife aren't already being killed for and by the ranchers. So back to Gunn, who seems to make her living defending ranching in the seashore at all costs. In a phone call, she stated that even if the elk fence came down, even if the ranches went away, they would have to kill the elk anyway, because they couldn't be allowed to populate to such an extent that they would expand beyond the borders of the seashore. Well, why? Why not? Because there was nothing to control their population. Now, briefly, an idealist perspective on this, I find it sad, if not even disturbing, that the park would preemptively side with death for fear of needing to introduce some level of death somewhere in the future. Let's just keep the wildlife down now instead of seeing what happens later on if we allow them to flourish. Maybe someday, in the future, in the fantasy situation in which there's no elk fence and there's no ranchers, maybe someday the elk would reach a population size where we needed to consider how to manage that population. Mind you, this is the same seashore where 5,000 massive cattle are tolerated. But we can't wait to see what a seashore with 5,000 elk looks like. And wouldn't it be nice if during the time that the elk population was growing in the seashore, they were coming up with a plan of how to properly deal with the population getting big? Rather than just saying, nah, let's keep them dead now. Keep them dead now. We don't want to even think about what it would be like if nature started to flourish. It's an excuse to defend ranching, made to sound like they're being responsible. It's a deception, and it's sad. And this leads to the other issue I have with what she said. By the way, if you're having a hard time believing that she actually said that to me, as I actually did quite a few times throughout that phone call, she actually ended up sending this out in an email as well. So it exists in writing for those of you who doubt. So anyway, the justification in culling the elk is because there's nothing to manage the population. First of all, there's never going to be a shortage of humans chomping at the bit for an excuse to go out and hunt if the elk should ever get beyond the boundaries of the seashore. God forbid wildlife within California. In fact, the Thule elk populations throughout California, other than Point Reyes National Seashore, are currently hunted. But what she was really referring to was the lack of native predators to control the population in a natural manner. Well, why do you think there's a lack of native predators? The answer is twofold with one underlying theme, that being animal agriculture. You have ranchers who actively and personally fight against wildlife, kill wildlife for the sake of protecting their businesses. And then you have Wildlife Services, an organization of the government under the Department of Agriculture that kills millions of wildlife every year, mostly on behalf of ranchers. Now, who is it within the seashore calling for the elk to be killed? The ranchers. Why can't elk exist outside the seashore? Ranchers. Why do we have a shortage of animals to naturally control a population of other animals? Animal agriculture. Enter Craig Kenkel, the new superintendent, coming from a park that was actively killing deer and promoting farming. Mind you, not an invasive species of deer, native deer. Now, there's a lot of you out there who are obediently repeating the crap about, well, it was probably a pest or the population was out of control. Listen, 4% of the biomass of mammals on the planet is made up of wild animals. The rest is us and livestock. 60% is livestock. There is no argument to say that we need to kill anything, anywhere, for the sake of adding some more livestock, especially not in a national park. And again, we have a situation where in a national park, instead of pursuing the reintroduction of native threatened predators that desperately need habitat, we're instead saying, nah, we'll do the killing ourselves and we'll promote farming. Livestock can exist here, but the deer and the predators that would control the deer, no. I wonder if Kenkel will get to stay in Point Reyes for 25 years, like John Sansing, the last rancher/superintendent. The former park staff that I've interviewed all point to the time that Sansing was the superintendent for the dramatic shift in how the park manages things, meaning a shift away from wildlife preservation and toward ranching. In case you don't know that little bit of history, which can be found in the administrative history of Point Reyes National Seashore, superintendents are supposed to be rotated regularly to prevent them from influencing the locals and changing how a seashore is managed. But the exact opposite happened with Sansing, who decided he wanted to stay and the ranchers decided they wanted him to stay. So despite efforts to move Sansing, he never moved, right up until his retirement. Back to Kenkel. Kenkel grew up on a farm. In the Point Reyes Light interview with Kenkel, he says, farming is in my DNA. Well, that's great. Isn't that charming? If Point Reyes National Seashore was a farm, which it is not, although it kind of seems like it is now. It's being made out to be a farm that we get lucky enough to visit occasionally. To those of you completely embedded within your homes and afraid of nature, the fact that someone has been outside and gotten their hands dirty does not qualify them for managing wildlife and the flora and fauna of a national park. Preserving the wild and working a farm are not the same. In fact, they're the opposite. Could there be any better evidence that nature and ranching don't coexist than the fact that ranchers want the beloved iconic Tule elk to be killed? Let me read one of the article headlines about Kenkel's last park. National park land up for grabs for those willing to farm it. How nice. And some background comes along with that. Mind you, this is an older article, but I quote, President Donald Trump has proposed nearly $500 million in budget cuts to national parks in 2020. More than $11 billion in repairs or maintenance across the system have already been postponed for more than a year because of budget constraints. And this part is not condemning that, but offering a solution to that which promotes farming. Leasing the land to farmers could potentially address some of those needs. Now, if you were Mother Nature, this would be a case of someone chopping your legs off and then offering you to purchase the use of some crappy duct-taped crutches. And you're supposed to thank that same person that chopped your legs off for the crappy crutches. So back to Point Reyes. I had just finished a multi-day hike through the Lemon Tour area of Point Reyes National Seashore and had enjoyed seeing Tule elk and other animals utilizing a variety of habitats in that area, as opposed to the elk reserve, which is pretty much just all the same type of habitat. A friend of mine joined me on that hike and he was blown away. He hadn't been there before, and we both enjoyed the peace of being able to walk through an area like that. He felt like he was on a safari, and that's what it could be like in Point Reyes National Seashore if we allowed it to be. And occasionally we were graced with the presence of some wild animals, which of course made us very happy and excited. But I couldn't help but also think, how sad is it that we're excited about every now and then catching a glimpse of wild animals, the animals that used to populate this area in huge numbers. And of course, I heard Melanie's words in my ears. our own Park Service staff making excuses for why such a scene will never happen. There should have been animals everywhere, but this is where we are as a society, where you can drive hours through California on a highway, see the hills on each side, never once see a wild animal, and think nothing of it. The lack of biodiversity is an accepted norm. The presence of livestock on those hills is an accepted norm. Many of you watching this right now think I'm crazy. You hippie, you're way out there. We can't have wild animals running around, especially not predators like wolves or mountain lions. Well, it's expected that there's going to be people like you saying things like that. But those kinds of words should not be coming out of the mouths of our Park Service staff. Those people charged with the preservation and restoration of what little wild we have left should be helping bridge that gap, educating people, helping them understand the importance of these wild animals and that we can coexist with them and that we don't have to be afraid of everything that we're unfamiliar with. As someone who spent years trying to get people not to be afraid of sharks, I am accustomed to people immediately rejecting the concept of accepting nature and wild animals. But that sort of sentiment should not be coming from our Park Service staff. But it is. And that has to change.